You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside after another long shift at the depot. The house was quiet, but I could feel the tension before I even saw her. Nicole was leaning against the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone, not even acknowledging my presence. I could tell right away something was off. Her focus on the phone was intense, too intense. Lately, she'd been making late-night calls from the porch, whispering like it was something urgent. I'd noticed the gym clothes she wore didn't match the meetings she'd been claiming to attend. I'd also seen odd charges on our shared account. Small at first, but then they kept coming. Late-night ride shares, food deliveries, to places I didn't recognize. When I'd asked about them, she gave me some excuse about helping a colleague in crisis. Then, a few nights ago, I caught her whispering her ex's name out on the porch. The ex she always referred to as the mistake. That hit me like a punch to the gut. I walked over to her, staying calm, but I couldn't let it go anymore. "Nicole, what's going on? Why are you helping him?" She didn't look up, not even a glance. Just kept swiping on her phone as if I wasn't standing there at all. When I pressed, she rolled her eyes and let out a heavy sigh, but her voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "I don't know, maybe you're just overreacting. It's not a big deal." I knew what I was hearing wasn't the woman I'd married. Her tone was distant, calculated, like she had already decided I was the problem. I was the dramatic one. I could tell she wasn't going to give me an honest answer, but I wasn't ready to back down. I kept my voice level. "It's not about being dramatic. It's about boundaries. You don't get to just use our account for him like that." She finally looked up at me, her expression cold. "You're controlling. You don't get to dictate who I help." The words stung, but I didn't show it. Instead, I stood there, letting the silence fill the space between us. I'd already learned the hard way not to push her when she was like this, but that didn't stop the feeling in my gut. Something wasn't right. The next morning, we sat at the kitchen table in silence, sipping our coffee. I placed her cup in the usual spot, but she didn't even acknowledge it, just reached for it without looking up. Her fingers wrapped around the mug, but she didn't speak, didn't move. The weight of the air between us hung heavy. I couldn't pretend anymore. I leaned forward, my voice flat. "Using our joint account to support your ex? That's crossing a line, Nicole." She didn't flinch, didn't even blink. Her eyes stayed fixed on her phone, scrolling like we weren't having this conversation. Then, finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm, too calm. "You're being controlling." The words were rehearsed, like she'd said them 100 times in her head before she ever said them to me. It hit me then. I'd missed the signs. All those little things that felt off but didn't quite register until now. Her liking his posts on Instagram, that fundraiser she'd shared for him a few weeks ago. The way she'd casually complimented his passion when it came up in conversation, as if I wouldn't notice. But I'd missed it. I'd let it go, kept thinking it was nothing. I sat back in my chair, staring at her. She wasn't looking at me. I had to fight the urge to press her harder, but I didn't. Instead, I let the silence stretch out, knowing she wouldn't offer anything more unless I pushed. That week, I took action. Stopped by the bank on my lunch break. It felt like a small thing at first, setting up alerts for large transfers. But the teller's eyes lingered on me as I was signing the forms. She asked if I was planning a trip. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I'm planning to notice." The woman didn't press, just nodded like she understood exactly what I meant. The alerts were set up, and I left with a small sense of control. But nothing changed at home, not really. When I brought it up again that afternoon, she didn't even flinch. She was standing in the living room, arms crossed. I could see her steeling herself, ready for whatever I was about to say. "I'm just saying," I started, keeping my voice steady. "You don't get to spend our money on him without any explanation." She cut me off, her tone cool and sharp. "I have the right to help whoever I want. You don't get to decide that for me." I felt the sting of it, but I didn't let it show. There was no point in arguing anymore. She had made it clear where her loyalties lay, and it wasn't with me. I stood up, hands in my pockets, and nodded slowly. "Thanks for your clarity, Nicole." And with that, I walked away, letting the silence fall again. The words I wanted to say stuck in my throat, but I knew they wouldn't matter. Not anymore. That night, I noticed it. I had been reaching across the bed more than she had. She turned away when I settled in beside her, facing the wall like it was routine now. The cold gap between us felt heavier than ever. I could feel her absence, even when she was right there. I didn't say anything. I just stared at the ceiling, trying to ignore the sick feeling in my stomach. The next morning, I was already halfway through my coffee when I realized I had started making small adjustments. I changed my emergency contact at work, moved my passport to the top drawer, and redirected a couple of autopays. Nothing obvious, just little things, just in case. She didn't notice, or maybe she didn't care. Either way, she didn't say a word. Breakfast was cold and quiet. We ate without a word between us. Her phone buzzed 3 times, and each time she checked it, then left her plate untouched. I caught myself watching her, wondering how long this had been happening. She used to smile at me over breakfast. Now, it was just another routine. I started keeping a spreadsheet. I'm a logistics guy. I understand patterns. I could track things, dates, amounts, memos. Every dime she sent him, I logged it. The numbers started adding up. The transfers weren't huge, not yet, but they were frequent. I couldn't ignore it any longer. When I showed her the list, her reaction was almost dismissive. She barely glanced at it. "It's not like you're being fair about this," she said, the words coming out like they had already been scripted. "He's struggling. He needs help." "You don't understand Nicole," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I understand just fine. What I don't understand is why you're spending our money on him." She sighed, like I was the one making this harder than it had to be. "You're just being insensitive." I let it hang there. I wasn't going to fight her on it. She was too good at deflecting. Instead, I spent the day sitting with the numbers in my head, figuring out how much she'd sent him. I'd never been the type to ignore the small stuff. I had a plan. Her mom called me later. I could feel the distance growing with every word. She talked about Nicole's generosity and how proud she was that Nicole was helping her ex. As if I was somehow in the wrong for asking my wife to stick to some basic boundaries. "I'm just trying to understand, okay?" I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. But maybe she's a little too generous with him. Her mom didn't seem to hear the question in my voice. She just kept on, as if it was perfectly normal for Nicole to send hundreds of dollars to a man who had no connection to us anymore. I ended the call with a tight smile, the same way I'd ended every conversation lately. No real answers, just empty air. Nicole didn't see it, didn't care. And that was the hardest part. It wasn't just that she was doing it, it was that she didn't even care enough to explain why. Her support for him kept growing. Groceries started disappearing before they even made it into the fridge. I'd pick up a bag of spinach or a loaf of bread, and the next thing I knew, it was gone. It didn't take a genius to put 2 and 2 together. She'd been taking care of him in more ways than I'd imagined. At a friend's dinner, she launched into this vague story about helping someone in need. Everyone nodded along, praising her for being such a saint. I sat there with my water glass, forcing myself to smile while they all built her up like she was some kind of hero. No one knew the man she was helping had been texting her at 2 a.m. for weeks. No one knew that behind the generosity, I was paying for his late-night meals and ride shares. The money kept flowing, and it started to feel like I was just watching it slip away, quietly and steadily. She began hiding the reimbursements, sending me texts with excuses like, "Oops, I forgot to mention this one," or "It was for something I bought for him." I didn't say anything at first. What was the point? She knew what she was doing. Then, one afternoon, her cousin, the one I hadn't heard from in years, messaged me. The text came out of nowhere, a sharp jab that hit harder than I expected. "You're being financially abusive," it read. "You don't have a right to tell her how to spend her money." I stared at the message, my blood starting to simmer. Financially abusive? It made no sense. But I didn't answer. What was there to say? She had framed me as the bad guy, and now her family was taking her side. I wasn't about to get dragged into a conversation where the rules kept shifting. That night, she left at 11 p.m. without saying much, just a quick, "He's having a panic attack. I'll be back in a bit." The door clicked shut behind her, and I tried to shake the feeling that I was being gaslit. I didn't ask her where she was going. I didn't ask why he couldn't handle his panic attack on his own. But I was awake when she came back at 2:30 a.m., the door opening with that familiar creak. I stayed quiet, letting her walk in. She paused in the hallway, looking over at me like she was waiting for something. I didn't move, didn't say a word. "You're creating drama," she said after a moment, her voice flat, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "You don't understand. He's in a really bad place right now." I didn't respond, no need to. The look on her face said it all. She had already made up her mind. She had already decided I was the one causing problems, as if my questions were the real issue, as if my asking her to explain herself was the thing tearing us apart. So I sat there, waiting for the silence to settle between us, knowing nothing would change. Not tonight. Not ever. I gave her one last conversation. I couldn't keep pretending like nothing was wrong anymore. I sat at the kitchen table, the numbers in front of me, the money, the transfers, every dime she'd sent him. The spreadsheet was long now, too long. "Nicole," I started, my voice even. "This isn't a negotiation. I won't fund your ex's life anymore. I'm done with it." She laughed, a short, sharp sound that hit me like a slap. "You're unbelievable," she said, shaking her head. "You can't stand not being the center of my universe, can you? That's what this is really about?" The words didn't land the way she probably thought they would. I didn't get defensive. I didn't argue. I just stared at her, knowing the truth now. It wasn't about me. It was about her and about him. And she'd chosen him. That night, my brother called. He could hear the strain in my voice, asked me if I was okay. I told him I was, because I was. You can be done and okay at the same time. It wasn't the end yet, but I could already feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. I didn't need to fix this. I didn't need her to come around. I had already made up my mind. The next morning, I moved deadlines at work, called a lawyer, and opened a new account. I didn't give her any more chances to play the victim. I made coffee like I always did, but this time, I set a note down beside her cup. 3 lines. Simple, clean. End all contact. Reimburse every dime. By 8 p.m. tomorrow, or we separate. When she saw the note, she smirked like I was bluffing. Like she didn't believe I meant it. I wasn't bluffing. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. The deadline was set and I was done talking. I photographed the house before I left. Every room, every corner, every trace of her, just in case. I packed a small duffel bag, just enough to get me through the next few days. Then, I redirected all the deposits, made sure everything was switched over, and turned off the joint overdraft protection. I wasn't leaving anything up to chance. That night, she made another call from the porch. I didn't chase her, didn't ask where she was going. The deadline was already set. I wasn't going to beg for her to make a choice. She knew what was on the table. 8:01 p.m. The next night, I was standing in the hallway, watching the clock tick past the deadline. No money returned, no explanation. Just silence. I looked at the ring on the dresser. I thought about all the years, all the times I'd tried to make sense of the mess, but it wasn't my mess to fix anymore. I picked it up, set it down next to her things, and grabbed the house key from the hook by the door. She didn't notice. Or maybe she didn't care. I walked out with the backpack, the weight of everything we had been sitting square on my shoulders. The door clicked shut behind me, and that was it. The new apartment was a blank slate. It smelled like plastic and cleaning spray, the air too fresh, too empty. It felt clean, unused, the kind of space where you could exhale for the first time in a long time. I set the bag down on the floor, took a deep breath, and turned off my phone. I didn't want any distractions. I didn't want anyone's opinions or calls. I crawled into the bed, the sheets stiff and unfamiliar, and let the silence settle around me. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. No questions, no noise, just sleep. Messages started pouring in. Her mom, friends, everyone had something to say. Most of it was about me abandoning her, about how I'd ruined everything. Her mom called me a coward. Friends told me I should have tried harder, done more, given her more space. But one message stood out. A simple, brutal text from a friend. She moved in with him. I stared at the screen for a while, the words burning into my brain. So, that was it then. She'd made her choice. And it wasn't me. The bank froze the joint account after everything cleared. I wasn't surprised when the email came in. Declined due to insufficient funds. She'd drained it before they caught on. I was left with nothing but the mess she'd left behind. But it didn't matter. I'd already moved everything I needed. I focused on routines after that. Gym, work, solo dinners. I rewrote my budget from scratch. I'd never been one for wasting time, so I got to work on rebuilding. There was something calming in the routine, something that gave me space to breathe without the constant weight of her excuses. Nicole's messages kept coming, guilt, blame, and, at times, seduction. It was like she couldn't decide which card to play, but none of it landed. Not anymore. Not after everything. I opened a couple of her texts, read them through, then deleted them without replying. There was one message, though, where she finally hit a new low. She called me a failure, said I'd never make it on my own, that I was nothing without her. I didn't flinch. Instead, I typed a short reply. Contact my attorney. I never heard from her after that. The silence felt like a blessing. It was the kind of peace I didn't know I'd been missing. The phone stayed quiet for days. Eventually, I realized I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. I was just moving forward. Reports came in like weather forecasts. One friend mentioned her ex still didn't have a job. She was covering everything, paying his bills, making sure he had what he needed. I didn't need to hear the details. I already knew what was going on. The news wasn't surprising, just confirmation of everything I'd already expected. Another friend texted me to say she looked tired, like the weight of it all was finally catching up to her. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but I couldn't. Not anymore. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. Then I heard that she'd taken her account private after too many people started asking questions. It was like she was trying to keep the whole thing under wraps now, hiding it from the world. But that didn't matter to me either. I wasn't looking for answers anymore. I had learned to live with silence. No explanations, no rehashing, no more trying to make sense of it. The pieces had fallen where they would, and nothing would change that. The only thing left was moving on. A few weeks later, during one of those bad weeks, she sent me a message. I'm sorry. The words sat on my screen for a while, like they were asking me to feel something. I typed a reply, a dozen things in my head. Things I could say, things I should say. But when I went to hit send, I stopped. Instead, I deleted it. Forgiveness doesn't need a witness. It doesn't need to be broadcast or discussed. It just needs distance and time, and right now, that was all I had left. The settlement was simple. I kept the house, she got her cut, minus every documented dime she'd sent him. Her lawyer was polite, as if this was just business for him, which it was. But for her, I could see it was different. She didn't show up for the first meeting. I wasn't surprised. But when she showed up to the second one, she was smaller somehow, less confident. She kept her eyes down, like she was trying to disappear. I walked the house with movers. I'd already decided what was mine. Tools, my old grill, the map of scenic drives I'd picked up on a road trip years ago. That map was something I'd never let go of. The rest of it, I didn't care. Her stuff was already in boxes, the spaces where it had been sitting just blank outlines, empty. I felt the absence of it all, but not in the way I thought I would. There was no grief, no heartache, just the weight of moving on. She emailed me later. Can we talk like adults? It said. The words were polite, formal. She probably practiced them a dozen times before typing them out, trying to sound like she was doing the right thing. I didn't answer. Explanation is a service, and we were out of business. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to untangle. I had no interest in rehashing the past or giving her the chance to rewrite our story. Whatever she wanted to say, it wasn't for me to hear. Word spread quickly. She left him. Again. Moved in with someone else. Again. I didn't know if it was a step forward or just the next chapter in the same tired story. A friend texted me, asking if I felt vindicated. I didn't hesitate. No, I replied. I wasn't trying to win. I just wanted respect. My apartment had a routine now. It was quieter than before, but that was okay. Bills paid, meals made, sleep uninterrupted. I got used to the rhythm of it. I found peace in the little things. In making a meal without hearing her complain about the time I spent in the kitchen. In going to bed and waking up without wondering where she was or who she was talking to. I visited my parents' graves one Saturday morning, walked through the cemetery, and took a deep breath. It wasn't some grand moment of healing. It was just me, standing there, remembering. Then, I booked a solo trip, somewhere far enough that it felt like I could leave everything behind. When I came back, I found a wilting plant sitting on my kitchen counter. I'd forgotten to water it, but when I put a little water in the pot, it perked up. It was strange how something so small could feel like a reminder. A reminder that sometimes things come back, even when you think they're done. When someone mentioned her again, I just nodded. I didn't feel anything, and that was the whole point. I had let go of needing answers, needing closure, needing her to acknowledge anything. I didn't feel anything because I didn't need to anymore.